Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedules to join us tonight. I'm Brett Walter, the founder and CEO of Climate Action Now. We're so excited to have you here with us, and also three experts on the vitally important U.S. Farm Bill. We'll do introductions in a moment, but before we do, I'd like to acknowledge the participation and sponsorship of this event by the Environmental Working Group, Earth Justice, the Food Recovery Network, the Climate Rally Project, and Elders Climate Action. You are here at their and Climate Action Now's invitation to not only learn about the Farm Bill, but to use your voices to help make sure that certain climate-friendly provisions of the bill are included in the final language. To that end, I'll ask Matthew Vollrath, Climate Action Now's head of content, to tell you how to get started with the app. Matthew?
Hey, everybody. So most of you know the drill on this, but for anybody who's new, I'm going to put a little QR code up on the screen here. Sorry, I need to pull it up first, and I will share my screen. And it's on QuickBase, so I need to go to the right tab. And now you should see a blue marble on the left and a weird-looking box on the right. That weird looking box is called a QR code, and that's what you're going to scan with your phone in order to take action tonight. To access that code, all you have to do is take out your phone, hold it right up to your computer screen or whatever you're zooming on here, and open your camera as if you're going to take a picture. Hold it right up to that little box until a little yellow thing appears underneath the box. Click on that, and it will take you to the App Store to download the Climate Action Now app, or into the app if you already have it. So I'll give everybody a moment to do that. If anybody has any trouble with that, just let me know in the chat. I'm happy to. There's other ways we can get you into the actions for tonight if the QR code isn't working for you. So just drop me a line, and we'll get everything figured out for you. But it looks like some people are logging on. I'm seeing the numbers going up on the left-hand side. As you can see, we've already taken 29,000 actions on the Farm Bill over the course of several months now that these actions have been live. And we're trying to hit 30,000. That's our initial goal for tonight. I'm sure we'll make that in good time, and we'll see how much higher we can get. So yeah.
Right. So Matthew, just leave it. You can leave it up there for a minute.
Okay.
I just want to say a couple things. You can leave that up. For those of you who haven't used the Climate Action Now app, please do. What's really great about the app is it makes it super easy for you to send personalized, well-researched, and well-written messages to our political and business leaders. Public opinion is the only effective counterweight to the immense power of the special interests that are wrecking the planet for their own profit. So your opinion really matters. Your opinion is your superpower, but it doesn't count for anything if you don't express it. So the app is your opinion multiplier. It is your megaphone. Please join us tonight in taking action. As you can see, we have made this a meeting rather than a webinar so that we can see and interact with each other just as we would in a physical party. I invite you to put your name and location in the chat and share your video if you're comfortable with that. And if you have any questions for our guests, our speakers, please enter them in the chat. With that, I'd like to introduce today's moderator and my good friend, Climate Action Now's Director of Food Policy, Marianne Krasny. Marianne is also, Dr. Krasny is also the director of the Civic Ecology Lab at Cornell University. Over to you, Marianne.
Thank you, Brett. And Matthew, I just want to make sure that you're checking the chat because we do have a question about how to take action from, it's the first message in the chat. So you're going to have to scroll up to find it.
Perfect. Thanks. I'll answer you, Nora. Just a moment.
Okay, so thanks, Brett and Matthew, our wonderful Climate Action Now home team leadership. Really appreciate what you've done and how much progress you've made over the past year or so. really grown a lot. So, and it's really exciting that we have 82 people on tonight on the Farm Bill. This is our third Farm Bill party. So it shows you that it remains a popular topic. So we have 3 panel members tonight, and I will introduce them one by one right before their remarks. So our first panel member is Ranjani Prabhakar, who provides policy and advocacy expertise on the policy and legislation team at Earth Justice. Great organization. They've done so much on the Farm Bill and farming legislation. Her issue areas are at the intersection of climate and agriculture and in advancing equitable climate resilient solutions. Before she came to Earth Justice, Ranjani served on the sustainability team at the City of Chicago Mayor's Office, I'm wondering which mayor, where she worked on various policy initiatives and programs in the energy and mobility spaces. While there, Ranjani helped launch the city's first community solar initiative, Renewable Energy Challenge Program, and Micro Mobility Pilot Program. So I think Ranjani's comments will be giving us an introduction to the Farm Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne, and it's good to be here. Hello to everybody. My name is Ranjani. As Marianne said, I am with Earth Justice on the policy and legislation team, and I've been leading our 2023 Farm Bill platform. So today I just wanted to run through a couple Farm Bill basics for folks that might be new to the Farm Bill or just want to learn more from the beginning, and include the intersections between the Farm Bill and climate change before I pass it on to one of my other colleagues. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Marianne, can you let me know if you can see?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, great. So we're going to be talking about Farm Bill and the impacts of climate change. And I wanted to start by just going over the Farm Bill structure. The Farm Bill is sort of structured into chapters called titles. And the numbers and the substance matter of these titles have changed over time. But for the 2018 Farm Bill, for instance, there are 12 titles, and that remains for the 2023 Farm Bill. So I just wanted to go over a couple of these titles for those that might be new to this construction. Many of you have probably heard of these titles before. Title 1 is the commodities title, which covers price and income support for farmers who raise widely produced and trade non-perishable crops like corn, soybean, wheat, and rice, and also dairy and sugar. Title 2 is the conservation title. It's the title that you might hear a lot about if you're sort of in the realm of Farm Bill agriculture and climate. But this title covers programs that help farmers implement natural resource conservation efforts on working lands. We have Title 3, which is the trade title, kind of self-explanatory. It covers food export subsidy programs and international aid programs. The nutrition title is one of the biggest titles in terms of funding in the Farm Bill, and it covers programs like SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, as well as a variety of smaller nutrition programs to help low-income Americans afford food for their families. There's Title 5, which is the credit program, covering federal loan programs designated to help farmers access financial credit through, direct loans and other tools. Title 6, rural development, which fosters rural economic growth. Title 7 is the research title. Again, self-explanatory. It covers farming and food research and education, and also funds the extension programs. Title 8 is forestry. Title 9 is energy, which covers issues that pertain to clean energy, processing crops for biofuel, and installing renewable energy systems and supporting research that is related to energy. Title 10, horticulture, covers farmers markets, local food programs. Title 11 is crop insurance, which provides premium subsidies to farmers. through a private crop insurance program where companies who provide federal crop insurance to farmers, could help prevent against losses in yields, crop revenue, whole farm revenue. And this title also provides the USDA's Risk Management Agency, RMA, with the authority to research, develop, and modify insurance policies. And then you have Title 12, which is called Miscellaneous, which is sort of a catch-all of everything I did not mention. But there are, I believe, 6 advocacy and outreach areas within the miscellaneous title. And a lot of the focus is on beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers, veterans, ranchers, and ag, labor safety, and workforce development. I wanted to go over the conservation title in particular. I know my colleague Jeff Horsfield, one of the other panelists, will be going into some of these programs with a little more depth. So I just wanted to give a quick introduction to how the conservation programs are somewhat organized. And I'll just go through a couple of these that you see on the screen. So in terms of the working land programs, this basically allows private land to remain in production while implementing various conservation practices. So the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP, are 2 of the working land programs within the conservation title. And I think are just a real boon when it comes to thinking of the Farm Bill through the lens of climate change. EQIP is a voluntary program. It's administered by USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS. And basically how it works is EQIP participants can install or implement some sort of management practice like improving irrigation efficiency or looking at nutrient management on eligible ag land and some private forest land. And in return, USDA provides cost share assistance and technical assistance through a contractual agreement. And after one goes through the voluntary program through EQIP, they may be eligible to graduate, I guess, into CSP, where producers are able to address a particular resource of concern, especially something of concern in their state or region. So that could be water quality or soil erosion. And in the 2018 Farm Bill, there was a change within CSP from an acre-based program to a dollar-based program. I believe Jeff might go into a little bit of that, but there have been some really neat changes and proposals to CSP in the next Farm Bill that folks can look out for. The Conservation Reserve Program is our land retirement program in the conservation title. The main purpose is to conserve and improve soil, protect water quality, protect wildlife habitat, and establish sort of long-term cover on highly erodible land or the land that's in need of conservation. So that's what land retirement programs fall under. And then there are easement programs, which impose a permanent or long-term restriction on land in exchange for a payment. So ASEP, the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, is a great example of this, and it's divided into 2 tracks. There's a wetland easement component and an agriculture land easement component. And the basic idea of this is to restore, protect, and enhance wetlands, and also protect farms and ranches from development, especially if we're conserving grazing land, pasture, and shrubland to ensure farm viability. And really quickly, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, RCPP, is one of our grant programs in the conservation title. It basically targets natural resource concerns through local partnerships. And you basically submit project proposals to NRCS, and partner entities work with farmers on the ground on particular partnerships. And then lastly, conservation compliance sort of acts as a force against the tendency of production subsidies to foster excessive erosion or destruction of sensitive lands. So programs like Sod Buster, Sod Saver, or Swamp Buster, you've probably heard before, and Oftentimes you might hear a conversation around tying conservation compliance to crop insurance, which is somewhat of a natural fit because in exchange for public support, farmers are agreeing to steward sensitive agricultural lands and preserve them publicly because they're publicly shared natural resources. So with all that said, I wanted to just put together a list of things that are not covered in the Farm Bill. While the Farm Bill is rather comprehensive in addressing various aspects of ag development, there are some notable omissions such as farm and food worker rights and protections, public land grazing rights, water rights, any regulation of the FDA in terms of food safety. And also you might have heard me talk about the SNAP program under the nutrition title, but the WIC program, Women, Infants, and Children program, are not part of the Farm Bill. Neither are pesticide laws or anything regulatory in terms of the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. So I wanted to talk about, what the Farm Bill costs. And just looking at the 5 years after the 2018 Farm Bill, we're looking at a total of $428 billion. And you can see the price breakdown here, where nutrition takes up 76% of the Farm Bill. And so oftentimes when we're in a heated, end of the run negotiation on the Farm Bill, there's a lot of discussion around nutrition, conservation, and commodities and crop insurance are sort of next in terms of what comes after nutrition. I just wanted to point out that crop insurance has a tiny bit more funding in it than conservation, with the inclusion of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a separate pot of money than the Farm Bill, but includes a lot of conservation programs. We're really showing that conservation and climate change ought to be funded, and there are frameworks for that. So I talked about the Farm Bill. I wanted to talk a little bit more about agriculture's climate footprint and the expanded climate footprint and what we should know about it. And something to just take away is that ag activities sort of extend far beyond the farm. There are emissions upstream and downstream of production. This includes emissions from food waste, where, in magnitude, we're looking at 25% of total direct anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions in the ag sector alone. Food transportation, processing, packaging, consumption, they all account for additional GHG emissions. So there's data to suggest that the full life cycle of food production may account for a third of global emissions, which is a lot. So the Farm Bill rolling around every 5 years is a real golden opportunity to address climate's footprint in the ag sector. I also wanted to mention that in contrast to other sectors, which primarily release carbon dioxide, ag is responsible for 37% of methane emissions and 79% of noxious oxide emissions in the US. And so that's just something to keep in mind, that we're looking at multiple avenues in terms of where there are direct emissions in the ag sector. And while we do talk about carbon dioxide, methane is a predominant emission concern in the ag sector that we should be talking about more and certainly reflect in the Farm Bill. And then this is just another chart to show that ag is the largest source of methane emissions. And in terms of the EPA's 2019 inventory, enteric fermentation was the single largest emission source in terms of methane, and manure management was the fourth largest. And so we're likely underestimating based on EPA's reported ag methane emissions. And in order to address this, improving monitoring and modeling of these emissions is really key. And right now, there's pretty much none of that. And so that's another sort of opportunity for the Farm Bill. So I wanted to borrow from my friends at the Environmental Working Group, who you'll hear from soon, just to show that, in other sectors, we're seeing that emissions are reducing because of policies and practices and funding, and federal funding to be specific. If emissions from agriculture remain steady, and all the other emissions from other sectors continue to fall as they are, we could see agriculture's share of US emissions topping almost 30%. And if it can fall by the year 2050, if we allow farmers to adopt practices that reduce emissions that are caused by fertilizer use or methane caused by farm animals and their waste, or perhaps increasing carbon storage in plants and soil, we'd be in much, much better shape. And so that's, again, a nod to the Farm Bill and the opportunities that exist there. So yeah, let's kind of put two and two together and talk about the Farm Bill, but then also climate change. What do we have at our disposal to sort of make the most of the moment that we're in? I just listed 4 things that, you know, where I sit at Earth Justice on our policy and legislation team, what we talk about a lot in terms of the tactics at our disposal. And you don't have to be a registered lobbyist like myself to engage in any of these, I guess, except number 3, but education, coalition building, direct lobbying or grassroots lobbying to cultivate relationships, and also communications. How can you build awareness? These are all really important tools, especially because we know a lot about the climate impacts of the ag sector, and we know a lot about what's not and what is in the Farm Bill. And so being loud about these matters is really important, and you've done part of the work just by being here today. Before I hand it off, I just wanted to go a little bit deeper. This is my last slide to talk about, you know, what are the opportunities in the Farm Bill that I know my colleagues will talk about in their panel discussions next. But a couple things that Earth Justice has been keeping in mind in terms of where we can actually build pressure on addressing climate in the Farm Bill. One is realigning conservation programs for peak effectiveness. So we want to optimize programs like EQIP and CSP to fund ecologically friendly ag practices, focusing on sequestration, diverse crop rotations, and targeted conservation on ecologically sensitive lands. And there are a lot of marker bills, which are bills that are introduced that sort of message an idea and provide language that would go into a large omnibus bill like the Farm Bill, that are really targeted towards optimizing these programs with an eye towards climate change and those impacts. So in getting to that 2050 year where we're reducing ag emissions, it's really about conservation practices and how we can incentivize them and reward farmers for already doing these practices. And then the second thing is enhancing knowledge and data. You know, there's a lot of data yet to be researched, where we could put a lot of funding into research and supporting unbiased, publicly focused data. And so increasing funding for programs like the USDA Climate Hubs that work with universities across the country and with farmers and industry R&D to come up with really fantastic tools for farmers to use every day. And also expanding farmer to farmer training would be really important. Number 3 is shifting the safety net for climate. So we want to reevaluate incentives and crop insurance to align subsidies with climate and risk management. And that would really discourage environmentally harmful farming practices and incentivize responsible land use in the face of climate change. So those are sort of large concepts in terms of big programs like crop insurance, which takes up 9% of the budget, as you've seen, the second after nutrition, to really make sure that the money that we spend is resourceful in terms of addressing long-term patterns. And then, you know, advocating for transparency. What you water grows. Sunlight is not just for growing crops, it's also for elucidating so many transparency loopholes that are in the Farm Bill and are just sort of embedded within the legacy of USDA. We've been advocating for public oversight of businesses receiving government payments in agriculture and providing more insight into environmental impacts because they're currently not monitored or measured on farm. And you know, repealing any provision that you know, negates transparency or informed decision making really doesn't help us gain a clear understanding of modern ag's realities, and time is of the essence. So these are just a couple of things that we're keeping in mind. And with that, I will turn it back over to Mary Ann And thank you so much for having me today.
Well, thank you, Ranjani. Those comments were really elucidating and helpful. So really appreciate that you sharing those with us, all that background information. And I think Matthew has a few things to say before we move on.
Yes, I do. First of all, thanks everybody for bearing with us on the technical difficulties. I know there are a few error messages that are coming up for folks. Just a couple things to mention there. If you get an error message, just press back and then press skip target. And you can go right to the next target. Hopefully it'll work. If it doesn't, just move on to the next action. We got plenty of messages to send tonight. So you shouldn't, you hopefully won't run out, even though we're having a couple of them that aren't going through. So again, sorry about that, but just let's just keep going and keep sending whatever messages are working. If anybody is still having any issues getting onto the app, I'll share my I'll share the goal tracker again so that the QR code will be visible. And if anybody is joining from their phone rather than from their computer, this link down here is going to be how you're going to get into the app. If you type this link into your phone's web browser, it will do the same thing as scanning the QR code. So that's can.app.link/farmbill, capital F, capital B, can.app.link/farmbill, capital F, capital B. Type that into your phone browser and it'll take you where you need to go. So thanks, and back to
Matthew.
Matthew,
I was going to jump in here also for a second.
Mhm.
Yeah, so just so y'all know, the software that we use to send messages to your legislators, the provider of that software made a very significant change. And we thought we had, and it has been mostly working, but this is our first experience battle testing it with a lot of people banging on it simultaneously. So that's why some people are having problems. It will get fixed probably within a day. This is a temporary problem. I've just been talking to our engineer. He knows what needs to be done. He can't fix it in the middle of the action party, but he'll probably have it fixed shortly thereafter. So just for FYI, as Matthew's just said, just muddle forward as best you can. And these actions will all be working by tomorrow at the latest. So thank you very much. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, so just a couple of things, Mary. The recording will be shared in a couple of days. And also for those who can't find the campaign, maybe like Matthew.
Oh, yes, thanks.
After, or maybe even afterwards, like if they're having trouble tonight. So you want to tell them how to search the campaign?
Yes, thank you. So if you're looking for if you're in the app and you're looking for the campaign, there should be a little section at the top that says recommended on one side and campaigns on the other. It's a little subtle, but you should see it if you look in the very top. Tap on campaigns on the right-hand side. And then when it asks you for a campaign ID number, put in the number 20. That's another way to get to our actions for tonight.
But you can also scroll through and select one.
And also scroll through and select the Farm Bill campaign, which should be under, let's see, Fix Food, I would imagine. Yeah, Fix Food, browse all 5, and Farm Bill should be the 4th one down. That's another way to find it.
Okay, great. And thanks, May, for completing all the farm actions. You can go to other actions on the app if you want. And thanks, Casey, who's already done 21 actions during this call. So
I am seeing the whoops, we can't find any campaigns all of a sudden. Not sure why that's happening, but try restarting your app if anybody's seeing that. Yeah, sorry for all the technical difficulties, folks. We will get it fixed.
But as we said, you can always come back tomorrow and do the Farm Bill actions tomorrow. So I'm going to move on, but keep putting your questions either for the speakers or for Matthew in the chat. Our next speaker is Jeff Horsfield, who's the Government Affairs Manager for the Environmental Working Group. Jeff works on policies to make food more sustainable and healthier, including those touching on alternative proteins like plant-based meat. Prior to joining Environmental Working Group, he worked in government affairs at the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and he also interned in the office of Cory Booker from New Jersey. Horsfield has served in AmeriCorps with AIDS United in Durham, North Carolina, and is a volunteer coordinator for Carolina Tiger Rescue. I didn't know there was tigers in Carolina, so I'm sure there's lots of stories behind there. And he holds a bachelor's degree from Gettysburg College and master's degree in public policy from William and Mary. So welcome, Jeff.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to tell stories from my days working at the Tiger Rescue, but that's probably for another webinar, I think. So again, appreciative of everyone taking the time tonight to learn and engage on the Farm Bill. Really, I think if there's one thing that we know about Congress, it's that they act very fast and work on a lot of things at once, right? No, that's not necessarily true. They work on very little and pass very little legislation. So that means that there are few opportunities to make progress on climate. And that means that the Farm Bill is really this critical opportunity in the next year and a half or so to get something done. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Here it is. And discuss a little bit about the Farm Bill. All right. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Let me scoot back. Pay no attention. All right. So really, before I get into it, you all have probably been following the news and have seen that the House of Representatives just passed a few hours ago what's called a continuing resolution, or funding the government for the next few months. And included in that was a Farm Bill extension. So I'll get into kind of what that timeline looks like, and how, even though they extended the Farm Bill for a year, that may or may not be the case, right? Just because they extended it for a year doesn't mean that they're gonna sit pat and not do anything on the Farm Bill. And there's some historical examples there too. I also want to just kind of refresh your memories a little bit on the Inflation Reduction Act. This was the massive piece of legislation that passed a year ago that included $19.5 billion for climate smart agriculture at USDA. So this Farm Bill is really the first time that money has been under threat from cuts. So we'll talk about that and a little bit about how folks want to take that money and use it for other purposes, and why that's bad, not just for farmers and ranchers and you all, and bad for the climate, but it's bad for almost every farmer out there as well. So I'll talk about why they want to steal some of that money. So first, an extension. So like I said, they did a one-year extension to the Farm Bill. This is next year's legislative calendar. They extended it through September of 2024. Now, when they did that today, you might remember that they included it with what's called a clean CR, or a flat continuation of government funding to avoid a shutdown. What they didn't include in that is any cuts to SNAP or any of the hunger or food assistance programs. And particularly with House Republicans, there are some hardliners that were demanding more and more cuts to SNAP and more cuts to help feed hungry folks. So that kind of anger might mean that there's going to be an appetite to redo or attack the Farm Bill again, especially early in 2024. You'll also hear growing concerns from groups like the Farm Bureau and other farm organizations that want a little bit more certainty over the next 5 years on what farm policy is going to look like. There's also something very wonky having to do with the budget and the CBO, where they come out with new kind of projections as to what things will cost generally in May of every year. So there's going to be an effort from House Republicans to get something done in, say, February or March, to avoid seeing those updates, because the new numbers might not look so good for what they want to do. And the historical precedent I mentioned was last Farm Bill, the 2018 Farm Bill, was extended for, I think it was 9 months. And then they ended up passing a new farm bill in March of the following year. The farm bill prior to that, the 2013 farm bill, they ended up doing a over a 1-year extension and ended up passing it in December of 2014 during what's called a lame duck session. So after the 2014 election and before the new Congress in 2015 could come in. So that's also something we might see. On August 1st, the House, the chair of the House Agriculture Committee, G.C. Thompson, said that he could have a draft ready in 3 weeks. So that was 3 months ago. I have to assume that he's made a lot more progress since then, and that he would only need a few days' notice to really release a draft of the Farm Bill from the House. And that bill would not look very good for climate. It would not look very good for a lot of the priorities that I know folks on this call have. So again, that's something to expect, that even though there's a 1-year extension to 2024, that might not be the case. And we're kind of acting on the assumption that the Farm Bill could drop at any minute and be extended through the next 5 years. So I think, all right, a little bit more context then about why this money, this Inflation Reduction Act money, is under threat. So I'm not going to get too far into subsidies and how they work. Again, much longer call. But the idea is that subsidies go to major commodities, primarily here corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, rice, and peanuts. And they go mostly to very specific states. So in the Midwest and then also in the Southeast. And they primarily go to the wealthiest and the largest farmers because you need what's called base acres. So again, subsidies go to generally, I think it's 0.3% of all farmers, or 30% of all farmers receive these kinds of subsidies. And they, again, tend to be larger farms. So folks who grow, fresh fruits and vegetables aren't getting these subsidies. You can also see that these subsidies are going up over time, and they've been increasing over the last 40 years, partly as a result of climate change. And again, here's some more data that details, again, that the subsidies are going to the largest and wealthiest farmers. The top 10% of farmers get 78% of all the payments. And we have a lot of data on the EWG website. I'll put the link in the chat, but it's ewg.org that kind of breaks down a little bit more. And we have a lot of pieces coming out and a lot of analysis showing how this is going to hurt farmers. The key thing to take away is that only 20% of farmers participate in federal crop insurance, and just 1.3% of farmers grow rice, cotton, or peanuts. And I mentioned those in particular because those are the commodities that Republicans want to take this Inflation Reduction Act money from EQIP and CSP and put it to subsidies for rice, cotton, and what did I say? Rice, cotton, and peanuts. So those three farms, and we'll talk a little bit about that more in a second. And this matters because USDA is spending their conservation dollars. So they've spent 99% of the 2023 Inflation Reduction Act dollars. And you can see here from our friends at University of Illinois that EQIP in particular, as just an example, is massively oversubscribed. About 70% of all EQIP applicants don't get funding. And it's tens and hundreds of millions of dollars every year of farmers and ranchers who go to USDA and they say, we want to reduce our emissions, or we want to reduce our impact on the climate or on the environment. Please help us. Please pay us to do that. And please help cover the costs. And USDA doesn't have enough money to pay for all of those farmers. And unlike crop insurance and some of these other subsidy programs, all farmers, regardless of what they grow or raise, are eligible for these types of conservation programs. So I mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act. Here's some numbers. Again, the great example is this program called RCPP. they had $250 million available in funding in 2023, and they received $2 billion worth of applicants. So there's billions of dollars out there that we don't have funding for. So what they want to do is take money from these farmers and ranchers, tens of thousands of them who want to, again, use money to reduce their emissions, and they want to put it instead to help less than 6,000 farmers in the Southeast. So cutting this money is going to hurt farmers. We've promised them $19.5 billion. We shouldn't go and take that away now to benefit the few and the wealthy. So in particular, these are the 38 states that would lose millions of dollars if we were to cut this climate smart conservation practices. This ranges from Nebraska would lose about $18 million to California would lose over $710 million because they want to take this $19.5 billion to give a few $1,000s more to just 6,000 farmers, or just 1.5% of all farmers who live in the Southeast. So these are the districts that would benefit the most. It's something like 33 congressional districts would benefit. Meanwhile, all of the other districts would lose money if we were to take away this the Inflation Reduction Act money. Again, mostly those who grow cotton, rice, and peanuts in the Southeast. And you think, why is this bad? The ironic part is that this is happening while climate change is making these very programs that they want to give money cost more. So rather than treating the cause, this is end up treating symptoms. So crop insurance payments are going up over the last 20 years. These other subsidy programs that are related to climate disasters like drought or hail or extreme storms, again, are being worse, and that's hitting rural America more than anywhere else. I'll also flag that farm income is increasing. We often hear about how farmers are losing money, salt of the earth, and the simple fact is that the median farm income is higher than the US average. 2023 is going to go down as the second highest year for on-farm income, and most of that is being driven by these richest and wealthiest who are receiving these subsidies.
Jeff, Jeff, how are you doing? Because I want to make sure we're almost quarter of, and I just want to make sure that Regina has some time too.
Yes. So I think, all right, what can be done? So emissions going up. You can see here from Boston Consulting Group that kind of baseline. With on-farm reductions, we can hit that first line that's down. That's lowers about 20%. That next one down is if we did lifestyle changes. So that's reducing food waste, as well as incorporating more plants into our diet. And then that bottom one, we can reduce emissions 57% from agriculture with a combination of on-farm as well as lifestyle changes. So these on-farm practices, again, we should help pay farmers to reduce their emissions. And we can do that through programs like EQIP and some of these other Farm Bill programs. So first, we want to protect SNAP. Second, in your actions, you want to tell your members of Congress to protect the climate smart funding that's in the Inflation Reduction Act. And then the third thing is to incorporate language to use existing conservation programs better. So EQIP is a great example, and there are two marker bills that were mentioned here that would, again, prioritize climate change and practices that are most environmentally beneficial for funding, right? It's a recognition that there is a limited pot of funding within EQIP and other conservation programs, but we can spend smarter by investing in these programs and using this money not for things like roofs and fences, but for things like cover crops or other practices that can lower emissions. So again, I'm happy to get more into these. There are other markers out there as well on things like the Conservation Reserve Program, other ones like the Farm System Reform Act that would help address CAFOs and some other legislation. So that's my spiel.
Thank you. That was really, really helpful. And thanks for the up-to-date today's news about the extension. So there's a couple
2 hours old, not even.
Oh, great. Okay.
Marianne, sorry, Marianne, before we switch to Regina, I just want to say to everybody, notwithstanding the technical difficulties, we have sent over 31,000. Well, tonight we've sent about 2,000 messages, and we're still sending them. And our engineer did increase the number of servers that are available to lessen the load. And I think you'll find that most actions are getting taken very smoothly. There's a few others that we'll have to fix overnight, but most of the actions you can take very smoothly now, since we bumped up the number of servers on the back end. So sorry to interrupt, Marianne. Oh, and
Okay.
Matthew, let's give ourselves a new goal. Maybe see if we could get to maybe 34,
30.
31,500.
All right. Sounds good.
So Jeff, I think that's you. Stop sharing because Regina doesn't have any slides, so we'll want to see her up there. Thank you. And Jeff, also there's some questions for you in the chat because I don't think we'll have time to actually have the oral questions. So check the recent chat entries. So thank you, everybody. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our third speaker tonight. Regina Anderson is the Executive Director of Food Recovery Network, where she's responsible for setting its vision, strategic framework, and fundraising efforts. The Food Recovery Network strategic framework seeks to recover surplus food to feed everyone who is hungry in the U.S. Regina works to use the organization's platform to meet the needs of the current moment and to put in place the systems and structures necessary to support an equitable recovery from the devastations of the pandemic and generations of food system inequality. Regina believes we must address the racial disparities that are present in our food system that disproportionately impact the health and economic outcomes for Black, Latina, and Native American communities, and we must do the work together. So Regina, the floor is yours. I know you don't have slides, so we'll look forward to your remarks.
Great. Thank you so much, Marianne. And thank you, everyone, the Climate Action Now group and my colleagues at Earth Justice and Environmental Working Group. Thank you both so much for your incredible information. Hi, everyone. I'm Regina Anderson. As Marianne said, I am here in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm on the land of Piscataway Conoy, modern day tribe to whom I materially pay respect through paying direct rent for them for their stewardship of our land, our water, and our air. I am the Executive Director of Food Recovery Network, and today I am with all of you without slides so we can keep taking action. We are going to surpass our goal. I know that we will. But I wanted to specifically talk within two hats that I wear. So as the Executive Director of Food Recovery Network, we work all across the United States to recover surplus food from all kinds of places, historically from college campuses, but also on farm fields, grocery stores, restaurants, large-scale events, you name it. We help corporations as well as higher ed to create recovery programs. We should not throw food away. So over the course of our existence, we've recovered almost 15 million pounds of food through one carload of food at a time. I also, Food Recovery Network is also part of the Zero Food Waste Coalition, which started in 2020. And this is a group of other nonprofits that have all come together to support the reduction of food waste in the United States by half by 2030. So 7 more years, we have to reduce that number by half. And, you know, as we all know, the incredible things that we heard from Environmental Working Group and Earth Justice, you know, we have a lot of work that we can do. And tonight, as we talk, I'm going to be super fast, but to remind everyone, I'm not empowering you. The group over at Climate Action Now, we're not empowering you. You are growing your own power by taking action, by getting used to being active in getting in touch with your local representatives, in sharing information. That is growing your power. Nobody else can do that for you. And so today, we can continue to do that together. And I just wanted to give everyone a little bit more information. And I say all of that about growing your power because some of the things I have to say are a little bit difficult to hear. I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed. That's why we take our deep breaths. That's why we know that by taking action, we can be part of the solution when things feel really kind of bleak. So please keep that in mind as I share some of these stats with you, that you are on the right side and that we together can continue the momentum that we know we need to ensure that we see the things that we want to see in the Farm Bill, and that we see our own communities thriving, and not just, you know, here and there, but that they have the resiliency to thrive year in and year out, no matter what is happening, no matter who's, you know, our elected officials. So specifically around the Farm Bill, I did want to talk about the Food Date Labeling Act. And this is something that has had a lot of traction over the years, and we are working really hard to get the Food Date Labeling Act into the Farm Bill. And just to give a little bit of context, so here are some of the numbers that I wanted to talk about. In the United States, we waste about 33% of the food that we produce. And that food waste happens all over the farm, the food system. So that is food waste in the farm field, that is food waste during transportation, that is food waste, you know, at the events that we all go to. That is a lot of food waste that is happening in our own homes. About 33% of food is wasted. And that creates about $408 billion every single year that is wasted when this food goes to waste. The majority of places where food goes when it is not eaten is in landfill. So it is not being composted. About 5% is being composted. About 8% is being recovered, you know, like what Food Recovery Network does. The majority of the food is going into landfill. So all of those precious resources that it took to create that food, to transport that food, to cook the food, all of that is also being wasted, going directly into landfill, where it is then causing environmental harm. When that food breaks down, it's creating excess CO2, methane gases, and other greenhouse gases that our lived environment cannot absorb readily enough. And that is what is causing part of global warming, the greenhouse gas effect. And at the same time, in the United States, the numbers are in, Feeding America just updated the numbers that right now, freeze frame in the United States, 44 million people are food insecure. That means to be food insecure means you don't have consistent access to the caloric intake that you deserve to live a healthy lifestyle, to be active, to do your job, to play with your kids, to just live and be healthy, to thrive. And it's, so we can see, you know, I call it madness to have all of this precious food that is being thrown away while so many of our neighbors in need are suffering. So food insecurity is in every single zip code. Now, we know through the research of the Zero Food Waste Coalition, so a shout out to all the groups that are part of this coalition: ReFed, Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and the World Wildlife Fund, Food Recovery Network, and dozens of other groups are part of it. That was the original group that provides us with lots of amazing information. So the Zero Food Waste Coalition, please look them up, as well as Food Recovery Network. We know that because of confusion with the date labeling, so when we look at, you know, a lot of the, oh, I just had a party at my house, so I have some actual labeled food, right? That the labels on the back of some of our packaged foods, they have labels that confuse people. So we know that about 80% of homes sometimes or always throw food away because they are confused by the date labels. So we are asking, as part of the Farm Bill, that we put in what we have done research on to know will help consumers understand when their food is still good to eat. Because right now we are driving a lot of food waste because of confusion around date labels. So about all that food that I mentioned, the 33% that I mentioned that is wasted every year, food that's wasted every year, about 7% of that is because of confusion with date labeling. And so what we're asking for is that date labeling becomes a lot clearer for consumers, so people in their everyday lives. We know that the used by and best if used by, those are two labels that make sense to consumers, so that people are afraid, you know, they don't want to get their families sick. So we want those two designations to be present in the Farm Bill through the Food Date Labeling Act. And we know that when people are not confused by their date labels, that they're not going to throw this food away. that they can keep money in the pockets for their families. And then right now, we know that because of the confusion with date labeling, the excess food that's thrown away, if we were able to clarify that for consumers, we would recapture about 1 billion pounds of food every single year. It's really imperative that we put this Food Date Labeling Act into the Farm Bill. And that is something that we can all do by getting in touch with our local elected officials in the House to ensure that food is not being unnecessarily thrown away. It doesn't cost anything either. That is one of these wonderful, this is what they call a no nonsense piece of legislation, as part of the Farm Bill. It doesn't cost anything for the date labels to be reconfigured to these two designations. And we know that industry, that the food manufacturers, they're totally okay with this. And by having this confusion, not only are we wasting food on the individual level, but we're wasting food at the consumer level too. Right now, about 20 states restrict food donation if the food is past its posted date. And a lot of times these posted dates have nothing to do with the freshness or the quality of the food, but more to do with transportation and manufacturing. And so if we can make these changes, there's a whole heck of a lot of reconfigurations that can happen to ensure more people have access to food. More food can be donated. That's where Food Recovery Network comes in, and our partners all across the United States. Homes that are struggling right now are no longer throwing away food unnecessarily because they are afraid to make their families sick. And we do know, because 44 million people right now are struggling to get food on the table in the first place, that food donation is really important for people to be able to get donated food. But a lot of times, if people are struggling so much, they might not even have extra food on their in their homes for it to go to waste in the first place. So I just point that out to say this isn't linear across all homes. Many homes don't have enough food to begin with and really need that donated food. Some homes are tossing away food because they are afraid of what the date labels are telling them. So I know we're coming close on time. I just want to say I'll put my information into the chat. There's a lot of information about food date labeling, but just remember, we can do this. This is very simple. It is cost effective, and it can help literally millions of people gain access to the food that they deserve. And thank you everyone for your time tonight. And thank you for all of this really important action that you're taking.
Thank you so much, Regina, and thanks for ending right on time and wrapping this up. And I just want to say we got a comment for all of the presenters from Pamela in the chat. Thank you, presenters and all. Very informative. I will stay involved and get my group activated on these actions. So that's exactly what we want to happen. So with that, I want to turn it over to Brett and Matthew, and you can take us out.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne, and thank you everybody for being here. I want to just really emphasize that all of the things that our panelists were saying are important and we need to do, they're all there for you to do in the Climate Action Now app. The panelists have looked over the actions that we created for this action party and they approved it. We added additional actions based on their feedback. So you don't have to wonder about, well, gee, what should I do? It's just there. It's in the app. It's in the Farm Bill campaign. And as you can see, we're just about to get up to 32,000 actions. The challenges that we had earlier were mostly removed. Many of you have been creating actions. So I'm so sorry we didn't have time for more of your questions, but we made a lot of progress. And this is really the name of the game, folks. We need to just bombard the Congress and other organizations that influence the Congress to make sure that we get those climate-friendly provisions, in the bill. So thank you for all your hard work in making sure that that happens. And thank you so much to our panel for taking time. And again, thanks to all of you for showing up to help get this really critical legislation passed. Stay tuned for upcoming action parties on chocolate, of all things. In February, we'll probably have an action party being put together by some of Marianne's students at Cornell on reforestation, and lots of other things that are in the pipeline with some of the other states. And make no mistake, these action parties do make a difference. We did an action party last month to try to get some Michigan legislation over the finish line, and that legislation passed. We did an action party to save New York's landmark legislation, the CLCPA. So legislators listen, they are paying attention. They don't read every message, they don't respond necessarily, but they do have people that are tallying. This is a numbers game. Quantity matters. We just need to fill their inboxes, let them know every day that we expect them to look out for the interests of the public, not the interests of the special interests. You know, big ag, the fossil fuel industry are really only in it for their own profit. So again, thank you, everybody. I hope to see you again in the next action party, and I will definitely see you in the app tomorrow taking actions. Thank you so much.
And we did it. 32,000 actions.
32,000. Woohoo! All right, let's keep going.